Okay, now it's stating we are recording, so you may proceed, Roger. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. Welcome to a virtual meeting of the Pensions Board of the London Borough of Hillingdon. This virtual meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the council's website alongside the meeting pack for this meeting. My name is Roger Hackett. I'm the chair of the meeting. There's a few online housekeeping issues that I need to cover. Before we start, some important online housekeeping for everyone present. Please ensure any mobile phones around you are on silent. Please keep microphones muted when not speaking and then on mute to speak. Only one person should speak at a time, and I as the chair will call these to speak and keep an eye on the room through my gallery view on those indicating. Part one of this meeting is being recorded. I'm now going to do the attendance roll call. Before we move into the agenda, I'd like to do a roll call of the board members present to confirm attendance. Please indicate you are present when I say your name. Tony Noakes.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. I'm obviously here. Hayley Seabrook.
Present, Chair.
Shane Woodhatch.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. And can I welcome Anil Mehta? I think you're present, Anil.
Present, Chair.
Yeah, Anil is our new board member, and he's attending this time because this is Hayley's last meeting. So thank you very much indeed for everything you've done, Hayley. Sorry to see you go. We'll miss you. You've been really so helpful while you've been the employer representative. Thank you very much indeed. Can committee members please indicate if they're in the meeting, starting with Councillor Martin Goddard?
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't think there's any of the committee members present, so I'll move on to the officers, starting with James Lake.
Present, Chair.
I can see Yvonne, who's here, and I can see. Are you present? Yvonne, can you just confirm that?
Present, Chair.
And Sebi, can you?
Present, Chair.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other officers present. Is there, James?
No other officers, Chair.
Yeah. So the last one is the governance advisor, which is Daniel Canaris. Are you present, Daniel?
Present, Chair.
Thank you. In terms of technical meeting control, if any board member leaves the virtual meeting partway through for a period of time, e.g. a lost connection, I will continue the meeting unless we are not quorate. The quorum is 2 members. Importantly, any board member who does leave the meeting for a period of time will not be able to vote on the item for which they were not present. So I think that concludes the preliminary issues. I think we can move on to the agenda. So are there any apologies? I don't think there's any apologies for absence except or from the officers, maybe, James?
Yeah, Tunde Adekoya and Shyam Petroda report their apologies for absence.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest or any conflicts of interest which people want to raise other than those that have already been reported or that we know about? So I can't hear that there's anything being raised there. So the next one is to approve the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 21st of April. So it was the 21st of April, I think, rather than the 17th, which is what the agenda says. Is that's right, isn't it, James? On the agenda, it says the 17th of April. It was actually the 21st of April. So first of all, can we approve those minutes? They're in the pack. Is that okay with other board members to approve the minutes as an accurate record?
It's okay, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And are there any matters arising from the minutes? I think most things that we discussed are on the agenda. I just wanted to raise the issue we were discussing just before we started recording, which is what is the situation now with regard to working, James? What should board be expecting in terms of our officers back in the office? Are they working partly from home, or is there a long-term plan, or what's the position?
The latest information is that the council is trying to sort of bring employees back in the office, and in general they're going to ask for approximately 50% attendance, sort of bearing in mind people's sort of personal situations, etc. And with senior officers being in sort of 4 to 5 days a week as well. So there is a move towards that, and that will be implemented over the next few weeks.
Right. Now, you very kindly informed us about the position with regard to virtual meetings and the pensions board, because we're in a different situation. I think Sab has confirmed this, that we're in a different situation. The pensions committee, we can decide to carry on meeting virtually if we want to, or we can go back to physical meetings. Is that correct, James?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, so regulations state that the formal committee has to meet in person, but the pensions board can still be virtual or in person as it decides. So yeah, it's up to the pensions board to work out how best. Well, no, then the administering authority just sort of in conjunction how best we manage this, and you know, whether we do want to start having offices in person again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from my perspective, I very much think that it'd be nice if we could actually physically get together, if people feel comfortable about that. But as you pointed out, it won't be till October, so it's a bit early to make that decision. But do other board members feel that it would be good if we could actually physically get together rather than meet virtually? Tony?
Yeah, I'm just an in-person meeting person, so yeah, that would be my preference. But I would understand why maybe that decision, you know, because obviously it's a Hillingdon building, and you'll have rules and processes that need to be met. But my own view is that a meeting should be held in person.
Shane, what do you?
Yeah,
think?
I'm keen to, you know, life returns back to normality, and I think it's best to have meetings in person. I'm in favour of it if possible. Can
I say, as Hayley's leaving, I think it might be better to ask Anil. Is that okay, Hayley, if I ask Anil, or do you want to tell us your opinion? Or
yeah, I'm happy for you to ask Anil.
Yeah, Anil, what do you feel about it?
I'm quite flexible on the subject. If everyone's happy to meet in person, I'm happy to do so. I think it'll be quite good. Sort of like Shane mentioned, going back to some form of normality.
Okay, so I think that gives you a good flavour of things, James, because obviously at the end of the day, I think we've got to go with what the administrative authority tells us to do. But I think there's a feeling that if everything goes the way that we hope it's going to, perhaps the next time it's going to be a real meeting.
Yeah, well, what I will do is get the wheels in motion, because obviously we need to try and book the rooms, and book rooms with a decent amount of space in them as well, so that, you know, some of the committee rooms are sort of quite tight. So yeah, I need to see if I can get capacity, so I can start working on that sort of straight after this meeting to sort of see if we can actually book a room that's feasible. So
well, thank you very much indeed. That's good. So I think I need to confirm the items of business marked part 1 will be considered in public, and the items marked part 2 will be considered in private. And now we can actually move on to the main agenda itself and start with the administration report, where Yvonne is going to take us through that, I think. So over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, for the administration report, it will follow the usual order, where we look at the members that are signed up to MSS, and what it has shown us as at June, the figures are as at June 2021, that there has been a significant increase in take-up of the member self-service, and this is mainly attributable to additional promotion that went out just ahead of the production of the annual benefit statement, because there was a promotion for members to view them online, and that seems to have resulted in the increased take-up. But looking forward, as we know that in September, we will be moving to Hampshire. And unfortunately, whereas the data can be directly transferred, the member accounts cannot. So they will need to sign up again. But what we have done, there is a drive to get members signed up, to retain these members, get them signed up to the new service. And in August time, around late August, correspondence will be going out to members with instructions how to sign up to the new HPS service. And there will be a drive to carry these members with us and to add more onto it so that, you know, it will continue. We move on to the KPI reporting, the usual KPI reports. Now for the month to May, to the end of May, there has been signs of increase and sustained increase in some of the indicators. If we look at, we're on page 12 of the report, especially in that first line, the death notifications, that has been sustained at 100% for the last 3 months running. And also the retirement notifications, that has seen a steady climb back up to 100% in May. And just below that, there are the retirement payments and lump sums, which was one of concern because these are actual monies that people are due when they're going, you know, when they're leaving. And, you know, that was running quite low for a few months, but that has also seen a steady climb back up to 100%. And the employee projections and refunds have been sustained at 100% for at least 4 months running. So that seems to be holding, you know, but however, there are still many other areas of concern, you know, like in the transfers in, transfer out payments, the deferred benefit notification. There are still areas, you know, that need to be worked on. And in our meeting with Surrey, what we have emphasized to them that, you know, that these are not just temporary increases and then improvements, and then come next time around, these will disappear and then another set come up. You know, we have emphasized to them that we would like these to be retained. I mean, it's a good move and we would like it retained and the others moved up behind it. So I think there's some sustained green shoots there, and we hope that it continues. We move on to resources. I think that was talked about briefly before, but at present, staff continue to work from home. But as stated before, there is a move towards bringing staff back in, heading to a ratio of at least 50% of the time. This help desk is still running full time from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So that is going full time as well. And from there, we move into the cyber scorecard. This will be discussed in 2 parts, but I'll give an overview in part 1 of the results that came back. And then in part 2, we'll go a bit deeper into the individual. Is there something going off?
No, it's my phone. I just turned it off. Yep.
I'm sorry, may I continue?
So sorry about that. It is silenced. I hope.
Sorry. Yeah. Shall I continue? Yes, we'll move into the cyber scorecard.
Yeah.
Where we'll go into in-depth more in part 2, where we look at the questions, but I'll give an overview here. We have had the results back from the Aon scorecard that we participated in. It's an assessment of the current processes that we have in place, and the results are aimed at giving us an idea of where we need to focus on in terms of cyber management, cyber security, where there's room for improvement, where we are doing well, and where there is room for improvement. The graph below, the blue diamond on the graph is where Hillingdon, that is where Hillingdon is on each bar. And the orange area is the average, where most other authorities that took part, that was where most came out. So that blue diamond, we're either above the average or below the average, depending on where it falls. And that dark gray bit in the middle, that's kind of the overall spread where most of the authorities fell. Looking at the results, on average, I think, we have come out either where most authorities have scored, in some cases above, and in at least, there was one case, at least 2 cases, I would say, below. One of the key areas where we fell below and almost outside of that gray area was to do with member data. Now, the questions were not specifically related back to the headings here. So it is sometimes difficult to tell, which of those questions that we kind of fell down on. But as I said, we'll go into the questions in a bit more in depth. But, looking at the questions, there was particularly around being able to contact your members should something occur. And we were not able to say with 100% that, we were able to contact every one of them. And I think that shows up from the report that we did before, how many of them, are actually signed up to MSS, how many we hold email addresses for. So I think, work needs to be done around getting more signed up to electronic means. But like I said, overall, I think we were either with the average or above. But we'll go in depth, a bit more in depth in part 2. At the last meeting as well, I think the few last meetings, there was also a query around the public sector network compliance certificate for Surrey that had expired. We have now received a renewed certificate, and that will take them through to June 2022. But as we know, we will be leaving in September. But this certificate, it mainly shows that their system has been tested and shown to be secure as far as the government network testing goes, that it is shown to be secure from that perspective. And to give an overall picture of the other entities or the other partners and soon to be partners, we thought we'd just add those as well for completion. So Hampshire, they also have an up-to-date certification, as well as all the other certifications that they have. Northern Trust, who are the custodians to the fund, they're also up to date. So I think looking at all the different entities, and the level of cybersecurity, I think that should provide some comfort to the arrangements in place around cybersecurity. We move on to the last item is around the single code. And that is to say that the consultation closed in May and that the results are due to be out somewhere in the autumn. So we will keep an eye on that. Officers will monitor that. And as soon as the results are known, then we will report back to the board. I think this one in particular, because it's a review of what we now monitor as the that compliance checklist, it could have implications for how we monitor that checklist. So we will keep abreast of it and report back to the board. And over back to you, Chair, if I may.
Thank you very much. Yvonne, that was most helpful, very comprehensive. So over to other board members. Perhaps if we start at the beginning of the report, if people have comments, should we go through item by item, starting with the member self-service? Do colleagues or Councillor Goddard want to, and Councillor Goddard, sorry, want to say anything about this section? Okay, I mean, obviously, I think we welcome this increase. It's very good to see it, but as you say, what's important now is the level of communication that there takes place with the move to Hampshire, and later on we'll be looking at that. And you know, personally, I'm very reassured by what I've read later, and I'm hoping that given the level of communication that there's going to be, that there will be an increase in the use of the portal, and some of the things that are being put in place will mean that particularly pensioner members will need to be, using more online arrangements. But I think that's the right thing to do. That's the way everybody else is going, and I think it's important we give that little nudge in that direction. One thing, just as a slight challenge to put out there, is I hope that Hampshire, like other financial providers, are going to be thinking about doing some sort of app for us, rather than people doing it through their PCs and that sort of thing. That maybe they sort of, over the next few years, that's what people are expecting. And once we've moved there, perhaps they will be moving onto that in the next few years. You mentioned the discussions with Surrey. One of the things that's been bouncing around slightly is the discussion about the additional fees that they want to charge us. Have we been able to make any progress on that? We were trying to see if we could possibly get some reduction there. I think James was the person who was speaking to them mainly.
Yep, can I just take one step back just to say that the way sort of Hampshire's approach is very much to try by default to get people signed up to get email addresses. So when you get a new employer, it's almost like a specified field that they have to complete is include your email address, and they'll be doing things like you have to opt into a paper copy, so making people go online, etc., etc. So I think their sort of model in terms of getting people up is much more sort of robust in terms of that. So fingers crossed, the sign up should be positive in that respect.
Yeah, and I think that's right, James. I think the sort of concerns there's been that pensioner members can't cope with that. I don't think that where people have done this in other authorities in the private sector, that they found that does disadvantage people. Most pensioners, have reacted very positively to that. I'm pleased to see that we're doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. In terms of Surrey, yes, they did respond to my initial request for them to sort of explain and correlate their increase in fees with an increase in service, and they responded to it, but they didn't really address the sort of the main point in terms of the business as usual and the increase of fees. So I've gone back to them and said, well, yeah, fine, you've highlighted a few items that you're doing extra on top of your normal business as usual, but what about business as usual? So I've gone back to them, and I'm still waiting to hear back from them. So we are still challenging them on the increase in fees.
Yeah, I think that's important, because I think as a public body, and given the situation that we're being asked to pay an additional higher fee payment, and we're actually not getting the standard of service that we expect, even though we know that the particular circumstances. I think it is important that we do pursue that, because I think we have an obligation to be financially prudent. So I'm very pleased that you're actually doing that.
Yep.
So moving on to the KPI.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, I've had my hand up for a while. James, will we, this benchmarking that we've got with Surrey in terms of uptake, will we use that as a benchmark going forward when we move over to Hampshire and see that there's an improvement, you know, that at the moment, currently, we've got 30% uptake in terms of registering for online service, self-service, and hopefully we can see the benefit moving over to Hampshire, that there'll be a greater uptake.
Yeah, I mean, we can use that. I mean, there's no sort of specific benchmark in terms of we're aiming for 75% or 50%, but there's no harm in saying, well, let's at least get to where we are with Surrey as soon as we can. So yeah, we will report on it regularly, so we'll be able to sort of use that as a sort of starting point. But there's nothing sort of formally agreed in terms of a take up, because we're obviously reliant on all the other the members of the fund actually doing that. So, but
yeah, but at least hopefully you'll see some upside.
Yeah, exactly. We can say, well, we used to have
communications that you've had, you know, people going hopefully over to paperless society, that there'll be an uptake and an improvement on current statistics.
It would be good if we can sort of demonstrate that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful, and perhaps we should give some thought as to whether or not we do want to set ourselves a target. I really don't know these days whether or not people are, have got in their mind what sort of level of uptake there should be for these self-service portals or not. But yeah, I think that's most helpful, James. Any other comments before we move on to KPIs?
Yeah, I did, Chair. And again, it's with MSS and Connected Rail. Firstly, I think it's great to see some of the KPIs upticking in the right direction, so that's good. But it's more about trying to work with Hampshire to try and see if there is anything that could be actively done about trying to get improved uptake on MSS. And I don't know if that's, if it even forms part, it's too late for the contract because the contract's done, but it's trying to incentivize them as an organisation to try and help us increase that MSS, because of course we still don't know. I think a couple of colleagues have referred to, we still don't know what good looks like. And I don't know what good looks like, particularly, I think I understand a little bit about the pensions because they're getting the money, and as long as they get the money, they're probably okay. But I'm not quite sure I know enough about deferred or active to say whether 44 is good or not. So it's just trying to understand, maybe from Hampshire, who of course provide this service to a number of other operators, see what that could look like in say 12 months time, and trying to work with them to achieve that. Because I don't think this is something that should just sort of roll over. I think we perhaps try and work with Hampshire closer to make that those numbers increase to a level that we think is going in the right direction.
Well, that's definitely Hampshire's business model, is to implement projects to make that happen. Like, for example, you're not going to get a pay slip, you should sign up to the member self-service, and the only way you are going to get a pay slip but via paper is if you specifically ring us up and opt in to the paper service. So there'll be more of an initiative for people to actually sort of sign up. And as I say, new starters, there'll be a mandatory field that says give us your email address, stuff like that. And so things, all of these yeah, they've probably got more detail, but they've got sort of projects in place where that's their business model, is to try and move towards that. So they've got sort of things in place to actually trying to achieve that. But yes, I mean, and they're also very, they see this as a partnership as well. So they are willing, they want to work with us. If we've got ideas, they'll look at them and they'll sort of introduce them and appraise them, and then sort of hopefully bring them into their working practices if they think they're a good idea. So it is a partnership arrangement in terms of that, and they are willing to talk to us and work with us to improve things for everybody.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Unless anybody else has got a question on that, could I ask Dan a question? Dan, from your overview and wider experience, is there a figure that you think we should be aiming at for self-serve or people signed up to the portal? Really, is there a figure that that in the industry, so to speak, we should be aiming for?
Yes and no. I think there's a figure that I would have in my head that would be nice, which would be very high, but I don't think there's any fund that's kind of close to getting to that. So it's great to have a very aspirational goal, and that figure in my mind would be somewhere up in the region of 75%. If you've got the vast majority of the people on there, that'd be great. But just like all authorities, the Hillingdon Fund's no different.
Mm.
No one is anywhere near that in that I've seen, and actually the fact that the Hillingdon Fund, I think 44 is pretty decent, and it's going in the right direction, and it is a lot harder for the to get the non-active members kind of signed up, which is why those percentages are lower. So you're by no means you're out of line with anyone else. I don't know that there's anywhere formally written down that there's a target. That 75 was my number, kind of picked out of my head, really.
Yeah, no, I was thinking that perhaps 2/3 is perhaps what we might be thinking about. But if we can leave that with James, you obviously have got all the things. You've got many things in place that are pushing us in the right direction. So please pursue those, and I think we can leave that issue with James now. That is okay. Anything else on the KPIs before we move on? Anything particularly worrying anybody? Any of those figures? The one that's worrying me is the one about death grants. It's a bit small. Have I got this right? Death grants is, where is it now? Death grants, yeah, 44% is up, but obviously death grants can be very important to people at a very difficult time, and it would be, if I had one, that's the one that stood out for me. If we could try and improve that. Okay, so moving on, we're largely going to talk about cyber security in the second part, but is there anything about what Yvonne said so far that people want to take up at this point in time?
Roger, if I may, just a comment in terms of the KPIs. I think whilst I take your point about the timeliness of the death grants, I think when you look slightly more closely at the KPIs, I don't want to sound complacent about this, but it is a matter of days of lateness that we're experiencing. I think the one that concerns me actually is where I think an improvement is needed is in member data, actually. And I mean, James and I were speaking about this only this morning, and I think James perhaps there's a comment in terms of the the cleaning up process as a consequence of loading data onto Hampshire that you might want to share with the board.
Yep, I can do that. Yeah, the board will remember that we've actually there are various data cuts where the information gets sent over from Surrey to Hampshire, and they start analysing the data and looking at it and testing it in terms of putting it into their system. And it's quite reassuring that Hampshire are already making inroads into data quality, because they're looking at some of this information that's coming across and saying, well, these are we've got levels of issues here, higher level, medium and low, and there are high priorities. And data cut 1, at the end of data cut 1, Surrey have now resolved all the data issues that Hampshire are classing as high, and on data cut 2 they're hoping to clear all the medium and low. But I think it's just encouraging that just Hampshire's basic systems and basic testing is pulling apart the quality of Surrey's data and highlighting issues, and those issues are getting fixed because Hampshire is saying you need to fix these before we accept the data. So I think that's a positive indication of how Hampshire look at data, and this is just in the early stages. This is let alone the future data cleansing projects we've got lined up once Hampshire are on board.
Yeah, that's very reassuring and very helpful, because one of the things we have talked about on a number of occasions was the importance of improving the accuracy of our data, and we were hoping this is what was going to happen, and it looks as if it's beginning to actually take place. That is most helpful. I mean, do we to a certain extent need to be a bit cautious because what in the scores that we've got here in terms of the scorecard, we're looking at Surrey County Council rather than Hampshire County Council, and so there's going to be a major change in the way we would have done these scores if we'd done this exercise probably after we moved to Hampshire County Council.
Is this the cyber scores you mean?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
Yes. I mean, well, a lot of these are sort of, well, we'll go into it in part 2, but a lot of them are sort of how we deal with things at Hillingdon, and not always about the sort of the provider. Sorry. So
yeah.
I think we probably touch on that in part 2. Could I just take one step back onto the KPIs and just also highlight, because there was something, we have a problem previously where some were up and some were down. So I asked for a weighted average KPI. So at the bottom of that report, you can see that overall there is a positive trend. So again, I think that's also something to sort of to highlight. There is a positive trend, and June is actually, the weighted average is 81%. So again, we're still sort of, it's all moving in a positive direction in terms of the KPIs. And as Yvonne said, we did stress, we want you to improve the things that are lagging, but not at the expense of those that are in 95, 100%. We want to keep those. So again, and they seem to be sort of taking that on board.
Oh, well, it would be good if they went out on a high. Certainly.
Well, if they get up to 100% and then we leave them, that would be yes.
That could be the case. Yeah. So before, is there anything else people want to talk about on the scorecard in this part of the meeting, because we're obviously going to go into a bit more detail in the second half of the meeting. Anything more then?
Chair, I just something that James said there about the data and the fact that Hampshire are backing it to Surrey if they don't think it's good enough. Could a potential result of all of that, it's clearly down to the materiality of the amount of data they send back, but could that delay the transfer over if they are not accepting data?
Then it won't delay the transfer at all, but it was just, we wanted to get it as good as possible before it goes over. So they're highlighting these issues. So if there's a postcode, for example, missing in the postcode cell, they'll say, well, go away and find the postcode. So as I say, it depends. The high level issues, the high things that they needed to get sorted are sorted. So now we're at medium and low, and they'll work in that. So they'll clear all the mediums first, and then there'll be the low priority. So it won't delay anything, and there'll be known things that need to be fixed going forward. So if they don't get fixed by Surrey, Hampshire will know what they are, and then they'll pick them up and fix them.
Okay, thank you.
The idea is just trying to get it as clean as we can before it goes over.
So Yvonne mentioned about a board being reassured by some of the information that's been set out in this report, and certainly, I don't know about colleagues, but I'm reassured that we are moving in the right direction, and this report is saying this to us. So obviously, it's a heavy burden on us. The pension regulator very much looks upon the pensions board as being the part of the organisation that should be seeking assurance that we have robust cyber security arrangements. I think I can see that we're working very hard to make sure that that is the case, and I'm certainly reassured by what you've told us today. Do other colleagues see it that way?
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Good. Okay. So on the other bit that we need to be aware of is, of course, there's cyber scams which are not covered by this scorecard, as far as I can see. And obviously, what is giving me reassurance is that I know that Hampshire are already signed up to the pension regulator's pensions pledge, which I don't think Surrey are, and so we will be in a more secure situation once we move to Surrey with regard to the problems of our members experiencing cyber scams. I think that's right, isn't it, James?
Yeah, Hampshire have signed up to the pensions pledge. They've done all the training, done all the modules, etc. So they've got that. when we asked Surrey, they said they were working on it. So yeah, we haven't had any updates as to whether they're finally sort of signed up. So that's something maybe we could follow up on that. Just say, actually, did you finally sign up to the, or did you finally sort of sign up to the pledge, if you like, just to check on their progress. But I know they said they were working on it.
Yeah. Oh well, that's something. And the other thing that I think that's happened that is particularly relevant to us is that my understanding that the framework and legislations and regulations about transfers that apply to the private sector are being considered by the DWP at the moment. There was a consultation that closed on applying new similar arrangements to empower what they describe as empowering trustees and protecting members, and that consultation has finished. And I've had a look at the LGA's response on that. It seems to me that, generally speaking, the LGA are welcoming the proposals as being workable, dealing with how to get the balance between what the member wants, who wants to transfer, and what are the liabilities and obligations of the scheme. They seem to be saying that generally speaking, they welcome the proposals, but they've made quite a lot of very detailed points for the DWP to consider these. And I'm hoping that out of this, that administrators will get something clearer and simpler to use, because at the moment it does feel at times a bit double jeopardy for our administrators in terms of trying to deal with tricky transfers. Is that a reasonable summary, James, Yvonne, of where we are?
I would say so. I'll pass over to Yvonne. I don't know if you know any more about it, Yvonne, but yeah, as far as I understand it, you're correct, Roger.
So I think that's a positive move. Yeah. Anything else on cyber scams before we move on to the single code? No, I think nothing else. On the single code, does anybody want to raise any issues on the single code with Yvonne? No, okay, just two very quick ones. The response I found to it that was most helpful was the one by SAB, because it goes through and it tells you which bits of the code don't apply to the LGPS. Because one of the most unsatisfactory things that I think about the single code is it's trying to do too much in one single place. And there's some people who say that there shouldn't be one single code. There should actually be one for the public sector, one for the LGPS. But certainly SAB have been through and actually said which bits do not apply to us. So when we start monitoring, that will be helpful as a guide to us. But what is interesting, I found, is that SAB says that those that are applicable are mainly down to the Pensions Board. So I think Yvonne's absolutely right in saying that when it comes in, we are going to have a bit of a revamp of the way in which we deal with that monitoring issue. The other thing was at the last meeting, Daniel spoke about Aon publishing some information on the single code, and that's now come out, I think, Dan, and I think I mentioned this to you before the meeting. It was in an email. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right, Roger. Yeah, we kind of issued our response to it and our thoughts on it, and kind of just quick summary to back up what you've said there, Roger. I think not too much has kind of changed in that we were still expecting it kind of towards the end of this year. There's a little bit kind of more certainty. You're gradually hearing more and more about what things are kind of going to be included and that kind of thing. And I think you're right in saying that there's a lot of it relates to the board, but it's actually moving in the direction away from that, because the old code was almost entirely focused on the board. And so there are parts of the new code that will focus on other areas too, such as committees, such as officers, the whole working of the kind of the overall fund. So there is a welcome move away from being solely focused on the pension board, which is good. And then the other areas that I can't remember if I mentioned last time, but there are new topics. So things like cybersecurity wasn't really a big deal kind of 5-6 years ago when the old code was written, and also business continuity has come much more to the fore. So topics like that are kind of getting much more focus now under the new code, and a focus on separating them and other things from the council's business. So saying it's not just okay to say the council's got a cyber policy and we're happy to abide by it. It's talking about funds taking kind of control of that and saying we need a fund specific policy on this, cyber being one of those areas. But that's kind of an overview of where we are with the code, really.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Sorry, Chair. One last thing while I think of it is in terms of the way we monitor against the code. Currently, we've got the kind of the model that we've been using where we go through and there's a kind of traffic light system. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't still be appropriate. Obviously, we would need to update all of the different points that it's covering, but in theory, there's no reason why we couldn't kind of use that same approach. But we are in a bit of kind of wait and see position at the moment until that code is actually laid and we know all about it. We can then talk about how we go forward. But I would think that it would be kind of very much evolution rather than revolution in terms of just tweaking the way we do it currently.
Thank you. And certainly the issue about the fund having its own arrangements and separating itself away from the council has resonance for me. That's something I've seen that has been something that the benches regulator has been raising and making us aware of for some considerable time. So welcome that. Briefly looking at the Aon code, the Aon 8 action points, I was very pleased to see that. I mean, one of them doesn't apply, the remuneration policy, but I think the other 7, I think we're actually doing something on all of these. And perhaps after the meeting, rather than going through it now, we might send around a copy of the Aon single code of practice, so colleagues can be assured that we are actually following what our external governance advisors are suggesting should apply. Admittedly, this is something that for trustees of pension schemes rather than specifically to the LGPS, but I was reassured to see that we are doing most of these things.
Yeah, absolutely right, Roger. I mean, you pointed out it wasn't specifically public sector. It was designed across the whole piece, but for trustees, you could easily read kind of committee and board members too, and a lot of the principles do apply. And as you say, it's great that the fund does the vast majority of these already. Very
reassuring, and thank you very much to colleagues who are putting in such hard work. So I think unless there's anything more on this item, we can move on to the next item, which I think is the TPR code of practice, which is Yvonne who's going to deal with this. Over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. There hasn't been any change in the checklist in relation to partially compliant, changing to compliant, or in the other direction. There has, however, been change in the activity behind the scenes to bring one of the items into full compliance. I will deal with case 6 first, which is on page 22. Now, this relates to the training needs analysis. Yeah, this still remains at partial compliance. However, to bring it to full compliance, we needed to have received all the self-assessments back from board members, which we have now done. We also needed to have done the analysis and report back to the board on it. So after this meeting, where we report on it and then we discuss the way forward, that item should then become fully compliant. With the 2 above, which relate to the IDRP process, as mentioned before, these will be rectified during the transfer process, where we will review and rewrite where necessary all our policy items. So that is it for the compliance checklist.
Okay, thank you very much, Yvonne. That's good to hear that we're moving forward in the very small areas where we could make some improvements. Have colleagues got any comments you want to make, questions you want to raise with Yvonne about this report?
Roger, can I just raise a point on the training aspect, if I may? Board members may be aware that as a result of the, if I can call it, there's the political gyrations that happen each May. We do now have 3 new members on the Pensions Committee. Of course, it's a big priority to make sure that those 3 members are fully trained. And James and I were discussing this earlier, and in fact, one of the members is now trained and up to speed. We have to follow that in terms of the other 2. Additionally, I think it's quite right that the 2 longer standing members of the committee, of which I'm one, need to continue to follow a pattern of training, and we also, I think, have some training needs analysis to go through in order to define that. But I would suggest that what this is going to do, I think, both from the board's perspective and from the committee's perspective, that there will be training needs, and I'd like to suggest that more is done, perhaps in terms of the 2 groups combining resources when it comes to training. I think it's a continuous thing that we need to do each year, and there's little doubt that the most cost-effective way of dealing with this is if we do pool resources.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Martin. Yes, I mean, certainly from my perspective, there is obviously a increasing focus being put on the training of pensions committee members, and there's various things like the good governance stuff and various other pressures to make that more formal. And it's helpful that I think that the PC itself is already beginning to move in that direction, because that's where we've all got to go. But obviously the pension board can't really be taking a view on this until it is itself fully compliant, and I'm very pleased that we've momentarily achieved that, because I think with the changeover of one of our members, Anil will need to do the training needs analysis to get us back into the situation where we're fully compliant in terms of our assessments. The joint training I found really helpful, and certainly I think it's very useful that James has already picked up on the points you made about how it's good for team building that we do joint training. It's also economies of scale, and the more that we can do that, and certainly if there is any pension board training that's going on that can be opened up for pension committee members, we would obviously want to see that happening. But we're going to talk about training obviously a bit more on the next item. Thank you very much, Martin. Is there anything else anybody else wants to raise on the code of practice? Yes, James.
I just wanted to say that Anil actually has responded with his knowledge and skills assessment, so we are still fully compliant in that respect, even with our new board member. So,
well, what more can one ask for? Thank you very much indeed. That's very, very quick. Great. Thank you very much indeed. Well, that I think that naturally takes us probably on to the next item, unless anybody's got anything more that they want to say about the code of practice? No, I don't see anything. So we'll move on to item 7, which I think Yvonne's going to take us through.
Thank you, Chair. The first part of this report is the usual workshops and conferences that board members have attended. I have recorded all that I have received. If there are any missing, then board members let me know and I'll add it onto the list. But I would like to say that, you know, these individual workshops and conferences, they're very important for members to attend, because whereas the training is more formal, like the knowledge and skills training is more formal, but at these various workshops and events, you get a more practical application of what you've learned in, you know, whether it's the TPR public sector toolkit that you've done, or, you know, any other training. These conferences and workshops give a practical interaction and application of, you know, the various regulations. And it also helps to keep up to date, because usually regulations are discussed at these events. If we move further on to the grid below, now we have received the knowledge and skills assessment from all board members and or soon to be board member Anu. Now the general findings, a general overview, one thing that has come out of the analysis is that there does need to be like a tailored induction and training program for all new board members. Sometimes, you know, on the other occasion, you will find that they are previously coming from a background where, you know, they might know pensions, but in general, you know, there need to be a specific induction and training program in place for new board members. We have gone some way in terms of the induction side of things, because we have created an induction pack, which I think Shane was the first recipient of that induction pack. It has like the basic overview of, you know, of the fund, the governance structure. It has useful links to, you know, where to find information on the TPR, things like that. And it also has like the conflict of interest documents that they need to sign up to, the confidentiality agreement that they need to sign up to. So in terms of, you know, there is an induction pack, but I think to complete that, there also needs to be, you know, like a training program that they would automatically move into. And I think, as Councillor Goddard has also suggested, that, you know, new members of the committee probably need to be, you know, some kind of introduction and training to include all new members of the board and committee. That was one thing that definitely came out. I think the other area, I have put some little gray shadings on some of the areas that, you know, kind of stood out. And that was in, the first one is in section 1 in the legislation part, where it related to regularly updated appreciation of latest changes. This section was sort of came as a surprise that, you know, so we need to do some more work on, you know, keeping members up to date on the different changes in regulation and the legislation. But what I find also is good for that particular area, there is a monthly workshop, I think, that goes on. I think it's monthly, LGPS Live. Now that has on it the pensions regulator. There's a representative from there, usually from there, and also from Jeff Houston. So usually you find that most of the workshops that have the regulator and Jeff Houston, you do get very up-to-date information on, you know, what regulations are pending, where they are at, what is expected. So, you know, I can send a link for that, but I think we also need to ensure, as the administering authority, that any new regulations are put on the agenda and that board members are made aware of them. I think moving further down into pensions governance, yeah, there was some awareness there of the role of the treasurer and monitoring officer. So that clearly needs to be addressed in the training, and knowledge of minor principles, SIP for Solus guidance, you know, so we clearly need to do something about that. I think, you know, these are all at the end when we consider, you know, what method or mode the training should take. These are definitely areas that we will have to consider, you know, bring into the training to make sure that board members are comfortable, that they do have the knowledge to be able to, you know, carry out their role, their regulatory role. And moving down further, there seemed to be a fairly good knowledge of the pensions administration area. I suppose because it's very topical and it's always on the agenda. Like I said, notwithstanding where it comes to new board members, we do need to, you know, put more training in there to make sure that they are comfortable and up to speed with the knowledge and skills that they need. But there was a fairly good understanding in pensions administration area, and pensions accounting and audit also, there was fairly good understanding there. But there was fairly good understanding there. And then when we get below that now to the pensions services, the procurement process, there was a demonstration there for, you know, a need for more training for members to become more, you know, more competent in that area. Because I think, you know, that's a very important area, because the type of procurement that, you know, the pension fund undertakes, you know, they're very strategic to the fund, and they're also, you know, very high value. And I think it's an area that the board needs to be comfortable that they understand well, to be able to, you know, review, you know, whatever procurements are made, to be able to review them to ensure that, you know, compliance, you know, has been taken into account in those areas. There was also the investment performance and risk, but I think it was particularly in relation to understanding how the asset returns relate to liabilities. So, you know, that was a general, you know, specific area that came out. So that definitely needs to be addressed in the plans that we have going forward. And there were some areas, quite a large area in the financial markets and products knowledge, you know, kind of understanding the interaction between the different types of, you know, products or investments and the role that they play in the fund. You know, there was quite a gap there in that shaded area that I've put in. And then the actuarial, under the actuarial standards and practices, there was a general need there, you know, like for training in the whole valuation process, which is important, because I mean, that is where the funding level is determined, and, you know, the whole contribution rates and processes. So, you know, it is important for board members to have an understanding in that area, to be able to, you know, contribute and oversee the process. So, you know, generally, I mean, the findings are that, you know, yes, we do need to put a comprehensive training program in place. Looking at the results, they are kind of skewed in different areas, you know, so in some areas there, there's a general need, but in other areas, it's kind of skewed. Some people have full knowledge or close to full knowledge, and then, in other areas, there is much less knowledge with other members. So I think that leads to the question of what is the best way to break this down and address it, and to come up with a training plan that will suit all members, because we all need refreshing from time to time, but some of this is clearly from the basics, the basic knowledge, rather than a refresher or an update that's needed. So it appears that the training needs to be broken down into at least 2 sections, and then to come up with an approach as to how we deal with the kind of top bits. There are like off-the-shelf programs out there that can be acquired that cover the full knowledge and skills. But again, the question is, is that appropriate for everybody? It might be appropriate for new board members, but might not be for those that have a bit more knowledge. So I think what I would like us to consider, which I put in the report, is to sort of have a view of how we might take this forward, whether individual training, comprehensive with a group, or a hybrid of both, and for officers to kind of go off and implement it. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Comprehensive feedback there. Before I open it up to the colleagues, can I just ask the analysis which has got board member 1, board member 2, board member 3, board member 4, which is on pages 30 and 31.
Yes.
Is that of the existing 4 board members, or is that the 3 original, or is that the 3 existing board members, and is Anil included in that?
No, Anil is not included.
Right.
He's not included in this. No.
So one of the 4 of us needs to be removed from this, and Anil's data needs to be put into it so we can see what the situation is there. But that's helpful. The other thing is that this is very much a self-assessment questionnaire. We've rated ourselves. I just wonder if there's any way in which we can sort of cross-references it and say whether or not the officers think we've actually done it accurately, because it may be from your experience that you feel some of us might have thought we knew more about certain things than we did do. I mean, perhaps I'll leave that with you rather than expect you to have an answer on the spot there. So
I could answer it generally for you, if in general terms.
Yes.
Because I did look at it, and when they came back, I did look at it, and I do feel that board members were a bit cautious or conservative in some of the answers, because it's not expected to say, for instance, on the say in the areas of like the accounting knowledge and so, it's not expected to be in depth to be able to, say put a set of accounts together and know all the elements of it. But it's from a perspective of being able to ask the appropriate questions about it. So I think that there was that feeling of probably needing to know more than what is expected, because there was some answers, especially in that area, from a particular board member, where I don't see why they wouldn't know about it, because it's an integral part of their job. But I just think it was being cautious of knowing, thinking that, there need to be more in-depth knowledge than is required. So I think the answers, some of them were more on the conservative side, but I think it's like erring on the side of caution rather than, putting a high score and then, you know, missing out on, like, you know, training or, you know, what's needed. So I think that some of them were a bit conservative, really.
That's reassuring. So open it up to colleagues. What, you know, Tony, Shane, Hayley, because it involves you, and obviously Anil. Any things that you want to comment, analyse, help Yvonne with in terms of finding a way forward on this.
Yeah, I just personally, I think the pragmatic way is that obviously we've scored ourselves on this, and it's about just having access to what's out there. And I think the way that it has been done, where you would send out a note saying there's such and such happening in 2 weeks' time, with, you know, it's either virtual or in person. I think that's probably the way to do it going forward. And then because of course it's our individual responsibility, isn't it, to make sure that we are tooled up to fulfil these roles. So rather than expect some really complicated HR training program for us, I think it's more about us just having access to what's available and us then deciding, well, I think I need to do that or not. I think that would be my view.
James, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of say that just in terms of some of the items Yvonne's highlighted, it's been requested that we do an accounting training session for the committee. So we'll probably be setting up a separate training session for that. I was talking to Councillor Goddard this morning as well, and the actuary, bearing in mind we're coming up to the next triennial valuation, as part of that piece of work, the actuary will go back and do a specific training session on the valuation, what it means, all the result, well, you know, just the whole sort of training session on that process as well. So there are a couple of things in the pipeline which should hopefully tick some of those boxes and clear some of the items. And just sort of going back to Tony's point, there is the question, do we have a bespoke package that sort of covers everybody and everything, or do we buy an off-the-shelf thing, as Yvonne mentioned as well? So yeah, going back to Tony's point, there are facilities out there where we buy a license for say 10 users and it covers all the main topics, and you go in at your own leisure and do the modules. And there's also, I mean, you know, you guys have probably done it as well, that, you know, the pensions regulated toolkit, surely that must help tick off a lot of those. If you complete that toolkit, surely that sort of helps tick a lot of these boxes as well, I would have thought. So I just wanted to say, there are options out there, so we can buy a license to access a portal or an academy. It's not an online academy, it's called. So, but you go in there and you pick your own module and you do it, and you work through it at your own leisure. So there is that option out there if we want to buy that. Or the other option, do we sort of do that and then revisit it after we've had the off-the-shelf approach, and then say, actually, do we need a specific session on certain things? But I think it's good that actually I'm not sure in terms of, you know, everyone said some people probably know more than they've said. But across the board, and Councillor Goddard mentioned as well, we've got new committee members and we've got people who may need refreshing. Is there an argument to sort of say, actually, that's just cover everybody and try and cover everything, and then have someone do a couple of sessions, bespoke sessions, and cover everybody from start to finish and just tick the whole lot off? I don't know.
Shane, have you got any thoughts on this?
I think one can do a blend, you know, if we know what seminars are available in a year's time, and we can do some bespoke training as well to address the shortfall that we have in terms of where we need training. I think a blended model will suffice and to help us understand legislation better, or governance, or what have you. So I think it's a bit of a mixed hybrid in terms of attending seminars and also doing in-house training if possible.
Hayley, I know you're departing, but you've got a HR background. What would you say?
I think probably a blended approach is the best way forward. Personally, I liked attending the sessions the online sessions that we had, the actual training sessions. I got more from that than I did, say, on the toolkits. but I think that's just personal preference.
Okay. I think it'd be unfair to ask Neil, but you know, if you want to comment, feel free to do so.
I think I'd quite like for it to be maybe a blended experience. I mean, I've used online modules in the past for other types of training, and they can be quite useful, but it can also be a quite varied experience depending on what the content itself is like. I haven't quite had the opportunity yet to start on the toolkit module, so I'm not quite able to comment on that, but I think definitely if there are opportunities for other forms of training, perhaps online seminars, or even if it's perhaps sitting in with some of the more experienced people from the board itself, I think, yeah, stuff like that would be quite useful.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I quite like what James was saying, that there might be certain, you know, areas that it would be a good idea to actually make available to people if they wanted to, a more sort of comprehensive, starting from scratch opportunity to either refresh or gain new knowledge. But then, in addition to that, going through perhaps at some point, perhaps if you could go through with each board member how they scored, and we could have a chat with you about what we think individually based upon how we've scored ourselves. It could actually help us, how you could help us. Now, does that help, James, Yvonne, or does that make it more difficult?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what the decision is really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we will be holding specific sessions, so that's a sort of you know, a definite. So we will be holding the actuary session. We will be holding other sessions as they come up, as specific sessions. You know, we did the governance update not that long ago, which Hyman's presented, you know, the latest on McLeod and Goodwin, all of that section. So some of them are topical, and we had a specific session on that. So there will be sessions. So that's fine. We can do that, and perhaps we can look at some of the gaps that Yvonne's highlighted in the analysis to have some additional sessions set up. But I just feel that there is an element of, you know, especially even for new committee members and new board members, must be something that we can do, which is, this is a whirlwind tour of the LGPS. But how good that will be in terms of detail, I'm not sure.
Chair, one thing I would say about that is there are people out there. So, for example, LGA run a course called Fundamentals each year towards the end of the year, and it's great for new committee and new board members, or even existing members if they want to brush up, but especially for new members to learn. And this year in June, the CIPFA brought out a new kind of framework, talking about kind of knowledge and skills and updating it and covering some of the kind of new areas. And they brought out, so the competencies that Yvonne has covered in her paper are still applicable for board members, but there's actually a new version for committee and officers that came out in June as well. So they fundamentals sessions and stuff will target those specific competencies. And we've, you know, at Aon, we've got some similar things where we've been running sessions which specifically target those kind of things. So they are out there to actually target your knowledge to the competencies that are kind of written down on Yvonne's paper.
So what I'm thinking, James, is perhaps if board members could have an opportunity to discuss with you or Yvonne their own individual scores. If we could do that next, that might be a way forward of actually getting for you a clearer idea of where you might be able to do cross-cutting courses where all of us need to be on them or want to be on them, or where one or two of us have got a particular training need that could be dealt with, and you could tell us about the ways in which we could deal with that training need. Perhaps you could take that suggestion away.
Yep. I can do that. I just am also mindful of the committee as well, because yeah, if we're going to have those efficiencies, then I'm not sure if Councillor Goddard is sort of feel we should do something similar with the committee and try and blend everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling about it is that I think there are some, there's a lot of core topics, particularly around LGPS and governance and so forth, which I think are probably of equal value to the committee and the board. You know, I think there's, you know, a lot of that, you know, whilst we are, James, looking at some fairly specific targeted things, which we're sort of doing in-house, as it were, using advisors. I think a lot of this more generic material, whether we source it from Aon or from the LGA or whoever, you know, I think a lot of that, you know, we could sort of, you know, buy a number of licenses and look to use it. And I mean, you know, I mean, I don't think it would do any harm actually to, you know, if we're running, you know, short on our utilization, I don't think it would do any harm to, you know, put people through it on a sort of refresher basis, really. You know.
Yeah.
You know, I think but you know, I am mindful that you know, a lot of the sort of, you know, the training that the committees had received in the last few months really has been around asset classes. Which probably, you know, I'm sure is of interest to board members, but it may not be central to what to their role as board members. Whereas some of these core topics, you know, around things like governance, I mean, my view is that you know, you can't. I mean, as a committee member, I can't afford to just you know, forget about governance and say, well, the board's worrying about that, I don't need to. So, you know, it's there are core topics that we all need to be across. And after all, something like governance, I mean, there's so much change out there at the moment. You know, we've really got to work hard to stay on top of it, I think. So I like the idea of you know, doing as much as we can together, you know. And also sort of you know, having this blend of if I can call it in-house and you know, maybe finding the right provider in terms of you know, licensed online training that we can do, which you know, ticks the boxes with the core products. That's where I would like to see us go. You know, I don't disagree that maybe sort of you know, with Roger's point that you know, taking each member, and I think this applies equally to committee members as it does to board members, and looking at their self-assessment and really sort of teasing out particular things that may take individuals in particular directions. But I think there's probably a very substantial element of core material out there that we could, you know, share and you know, acquire through some sort of licensing structure, you know, fairly cost effectively.
Okay, I think that's probably as clear a explanation of what we all want as you're going to get, James. I don't think it's we're going to be able to help you anymore. Can I ask one last question? However, I think Shane has now completed the public sector toolkit. Is that correct? Shane, have you, because on the chart at the moment, it shows you as only having done one of the modules.
Yvonne, have I sent it to you in terms of completing the training?
I have not seen it, Shane.
Chair, I think I have that.
I don't remember seeing it, but if you have, please resend it and I will update. I'll update the records.
Yeah, I think I have done it, Chair, just not sent it to Yvonne, so I will the confirmation.
Yeah, that's fine. Send it and I'll update the records.
Yeah, that would be super. And Neil, I think he's going to try and do it by the time of the next pension board, which I now know is in October. That's great. Well, thank you everybody for that, and I hope that some guidance, James, Yvonne, and look forward to talking to you more about that. I think the next one is the work programme, and I think that's Yvonne to take us through that. Oh, sorry, Anil, you need to go, don't you?
Yes, apologies everyone. I'm going to have to excuse myself at this stage, but hopefully I look forward to catching up with you guys for the next meeting. And like I said, Roger, hopefully I will have got stuck into some of these training modules by then.
But thank you for making yourself available at a relatively short notice. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. You have a nice afternoon. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye. Okay. I think if sorry, just to go back, Yvonne, if you can take us through the work programme report.
At the last board, a number of items were put forward by the board to be either added to the work programme or to be added to the work programme where they were not otherwise covered by the committee. So the first section of this report takes us through the items that were suggested and states whether they will come on the board agenda as an item or whether it will come through the committee. Now, basically, what was used to determine which one goes on the board agenda and which one goes on the committee was in relation to the board's function as ensuring compliance, assisting the administering authority in ensuring compliance. So where there is a regulation that already states that the fund should do something or should not do something, then that decision has already been made. So that goes straight onto the board, onto the board's agenda. Does not mean that the committee will not be reported to on them, but it means that they can go directly there because there isn't a decision to be made that needs to be reviewed. The regulation already states what should be done. And where decisions need to be made or where the committee is already handling that area, then it will come to the board for oversight through the committee reports. So looking at the items starting on page 32, what will be added onto the board's work program or continue to be reported on because some are already there. So cybersecurity will be, we continue to report to the board. The single code, we spoke about that earlier, where it is replacing the compliance checklist. So that will continue to be reported. The good governance project will follow up on that and any implications for the board. The Pensions Act, we will update the board on that, and data accuracy, especially in terms of the data score and data improvement projects. We will add those to the board's agenda where at the appropriate times. The other items that will come through the committee reports be the McLeod project, the communications relating to the transfer, because the committee already oversees and takes reports on the transfer to Hampshire, and then the board reviews it as part of the committee reports. The exit payments, the Pensions Act is on both. As I said, there are some areas where it will be reported to both, and exit payments that will come through the committee payments as well as soon as the measures are announced or whether it is revisited by the government. And below that is the usual the meetings of the board and the suggested items for those meetings. Some of the items that have been referred to above, we do not know when they will be decided by the by the government. But as soon as there is a report on them or there is a new regulation on them, then they will be slotted in to the agenda at the appropriate points in time. And back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. So I'll open that up to colleagues. What do people feel about the report and the proposals set out in it? So start with Tony.
I've got no comment, Chair. I think it captures everything. We've got the dates of the meetings. It's just getting dates for the items in terms of that everyone's been through. So it seems to be pretty robust. Thank you.
Shane, what's your feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm also, I think it's quite clear, and it is, robust, and I'm quite happy with presentation and the planned future dates and what is presented, which topics are presented at each meeting. No further comment.
Okay. You're leaving, Hayley, but you feel free to say any last things that you might like to about it if you've got anything.
Yeah, no further comment on that from me, Roger. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, fine. I'm happy with it as well. The main comment that I've got is about the good governance project, where I think this is really, really important, because we're going to have to make some, well, the administrative authority and the council are going to have to make some important decisions under the good governance project. I mean, you've already begun to make some of those decisions, I think, because there has to be a LGPS senior officer identified, and I think Paul has already said that he doesn't want to add that role to his, so we've still got to be thinking about who is going to be the LGPS senior officer. There's organisation structure changes which I think are really important, and I believe that the reorganisation is now coming to an end, and that there will be opportunities to actually begin to think proactively about how we are going to deal with these proposals, knowing about where within the organisation structure that the fund is going to actually operate. So I'm particularly interested in the good governance project, but there isn't specific timescales, is there, James, as to when we've got to implement this? But we sort of know that what it is we should be working towards and thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's still we're still waiting on the final sort of guidance to come out, but yeah, it's expected towards the end of the year. So yeah, I mean, and it's probably not going to be much different to what's already been sort of highlighted, as you say, like the officer, the structures, etc., the different policies. So we're sort of pretty sure, we're pretty confident of what it's going to contain, but yeah, we're still yet to have that final guidance.
Yeah. So from my perspective as chair of the board, I'm indicated that I hope that the authority is anticipating the decisions that it needs to make, and are bearing these really fundamental and significant structural changes in mind going forward. So I think that's all we've got to say about that report, and unless there's anybody's got anything more to add. No, not seeing anybody. No. So I think we can move on to item 9. I think this is James, isn't it?
Yep, thank you, Chair. This is just to briefly highlight, the board have been talking about their terms of reference for a number of meetings now, and we've sort of discussed potential changes along with democratic services and what's sort of sensible with working within the council's framework of terms of reference. And we prepared a revised terms of reference which were approved by full council in July of this year, so just a couple of weeks ago. So that's now been done. So we're now in a position to move forward in terms of producing our own more detailed code. So that's something that we'll work on in terms of putting together a code, probably in consultation with the chair as well, just to make sure that that they're happy, because it will be the the pensions board terms of reference, or the pensions board code, sorry. So yeah, we'll pull it together. We'll pull together a more detailed code. We'll pull out the sort of salient points which I think sort of are probably missing from the current setup. Things like the quorum, for example, meeting, reporting, the terms of the office in terms of setting out an actual sort of succession plan, and things like that. So we'll just pull together a code which has got more detail and is more robust. So we'll start to work on that. And that was it, really.
Yeah, that seems fine to me. Are other colleagues happy that we deal with this in that way, that James and I work through a document that we bring back to the board to consider?
Agreed. Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah, good. On this issue about the 4 years, that obviously it's the mechanics of how that will actually work, and when the sort of 4 year period comes up, and we do need to think about it, because the mechanics of how it's operated. I've made some suggestions to James about the way in which we might deal with that, because obviously my year as chair ends in January, and it will then move to the employer's side to chair the meeting, and it might be convenient to actually also have that as the time at which we look at this issue of members who've served for 4 years, and I will have served for 4 years by that stage, members standing down, and the opportunity, if they wish to ask the administrative authority that they'd like to continue, or whether or not that they want to end their term of office. So I've begun to have those discussions with James, and hopefully in the October meeting we can put some flesh on the bones of that and have some concrete suggestions to make. Is that helpful, James?
Yep, no, that's perfect. And I think also we're lucky in terms of sort of succession planning, if you like, due to the fact that that you've been the longest standing member. Then it's quite sort of convenient that Tony's next, and then Shane, and then it'll be a Neil. So actually there's probably quite a nice progression of people who've served a certain amount of time within a 4 year period as well. So we might have to tweak it a little bit, but it's still it should work out quite well in terms of succession planning.
Yeah, that's good. Excellent. Okay, so I think we've dealt with that particular item. So I think we now need to go to part 2, don't we, James? I think that's what I need to do now. I need to stop
recording.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
okay, bear with me then. I will now stop recording as we terminate part 1.